Ladies and gentlemen, brethren and companions, good evening and welcome. I hope 2022 is treating you well so far. And welcome to Solomon Live. I'm Brodie, the Provincial Communications Officer for Worcestershire, and I have the honour of hosting these monthly webinars of lively Freemasonry conversation. And before we continue, thank you ever so much for sending in your questions. We'll put as many of those to our special guests as we possibly can. So without any further ado, our Solomon Live this evening is Through the Archway, Developing the Royal Arch in its third century. And joining me this evening, excellent companion, Patrick Penny, Chair of the Membership and Communications Working Party. Patrick, how the devil are you?
Oh, Brodie, good evening, and thank you so much for inviting me along this evening. Life is very good, thank you, and a lot better for being here and sharing it with you and everyone who's tuned in this evening.
Well, it's great to have you here. Now, I thought we could get to know you first, because we've got a lot to discuss, haven't we, in the next 40 minutes or so. So let's talk about your journey through Royal Arch, because I think it's safe to say that you've come a long way.
What do you mean? I left Devonshire and came to London. Yeah, I was initiated into the craft back in 1991. In my early mid-20s, and then was exalted into Royal Arch in 1995. It was a slightly strange time for me and the family, actually, because I was actually exalted a week after my mum died. And I had the amazing honour and very emotional experience of my father acting as the deacon, if I can use the expression, to show me around. So that was incredibly moving. I was very lucky that when I was first initiated, he did that for me at my initiation as well. So just incredibly emotive stuff. So I joined in 1995 and went up, progressed in the lodge and the chapter at roughly the same kind of time. Went through the chair of my craft lodge in 2000, and then went through the 3 chairs in the Royal Arch from 2001, becoming the first principal in 2003. So I managed to dovetail the 2 journeys really well. Very lucky after that to have a journey in Metropolitan after it was founded. And in the Royal Arch, I was one of the Metropolitan Assistant Grand Directors of Ceremonies back in 2007. Then went through to become one of the deputies, and the Metropolitan Grand Director of Ceremonies, which I served and had the joy of serving as, actually. Such a great job for 4 years from 2013 to 17. Had to have a little break because of family circumstances. I lost my wife to cancer. But was then honoured to be invited back by Sir Michael Snyder, the Metropolitan Grand Superintendent, to become second Metropolitan Grand Principal, which I am at the moment, and was at the same time put onto the Committee of General Purposes, which is just an amazing opportunity, and just delighted to be able to serve on that basis.
Well, thank you for sharing your journey with us. I mean, I think we've got to know you a little bit more. And what is it you love about Royal Arch? Because clearly to reach the heights that you have, you must love it. I think that's evident already. We've only been speaking for a few minutes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I do. I absolutely love Royal Arch. And so much of it actually goes back to what it's all about. And there was a huge emotive part of it for me, as you could tell from what I was saying earlier about how I joined and when I joined. And there is a concept of eternity that runs through the Royal Arch, and you could imagine that as a young man who just lost a parent, that chimed hugely. But there's so much that's right with it. It has the best reveal in all of Freemasonry, and in every meeting you go to, you are on a journey. We are searching for what's lost, and therefore there is so much about self-discovery, and to remind ourselves to continue to look for and discover things in the future. It's really exciting. Love it. And the ritual's really cool as well. But let's
talk about your very important role, Chair of the Membership and Communications Working Party. So not only do you love Freemasonry, but you're helping to shape it and guide it. Tell me about that role.
Oh, it's just a huge honour to be able to do it. And it's a working party we only put together last year as we were coming through and out of COVID. And I know we're going to touch on what we do in greater detail in the future, going on later on. But what we're doing, we're looking at 2 different areas. We're looking at how we can improve membership in the Royal Arch to make it more engaging for current members, how we improve attraction into the Royal Arch and look at the systems that we're using for that, but also just to improve our general communications in it. This is a whole new departure for us centrally in the Royal Arch. We've seen huge changes going on in the craft for a number of years, and they've been fantastic. And the new members pathway that's just been rolled out is a brilliant example of that. But we've been slightly behind, as far, if I can use that expression, in the Royal Arch, and it's lovely to be part of that process, to drive and be proactive and drive the changes forward for us from here on in. So just fantastic opportunity and absolutely loving it.
And we can talk about some of those exciting things you've got planned a little bit later on, as you've alluded to. But let's talk about what Royal Arch is, because we've got people joining us who are perhaps new members, who perhaps haven't joined yet, perhaps people who have been in for many, many years. How would you describe what Royal Arch is?
Well, I don't want to have to issue a spoiler alert at this point, so I'm not going to go into the detail of it. But I suppose that there are two different things. The Royal Arch answers a whole lot of questions. Now, as we know, the Master Mason's degree, the third degree, is entire, it's complete in itself. The teachings of the Master Mason's degree are amazing, really important, and it's a complete degree. But there are various things that are left outstanding, as we know. Once you've been through the third degree, you know that. And every time we open the third degree, we're talking about seeking for that which was lost. The brilliant thing about the Royal Arch is actually we found out the answers to those questions. So part of it is about that, is actually being able to fulfill that. But also, as I was just touching on earlier, it's about journeys and about seeking and about enlightenment. And so it's not just about doing the ceremony once and working out what was lost. So every time we sit through an exaltation ceremony, we can then reflect on and think about how we can improve our own enlightenment in our daily lives. And that's an amazing thing for us to have. So
beautifully explained, I have to say, beautifully explained. So you've kind of touched on it. Why is the alignment between craft and Royal Arch so important?
Well, because the Royal Arch is the completion of the journey in pure ancient masonry. Simple as that. And you may go, what on earth does that mean? What is pure ancient masonry? I'm a craft mason, I'm a Royal Arch mason. What does pure ancient masonry mean? Well, look, if you dust off your little blue, your big blue book, the Book of Constitutions, which I'm sure we all have somewhere, if not propping up a table, but we've downloaded the version, the soft version from the website as well. If you look in here, in the preliminary declarations to the craft constitutions, it talks about the journey in pure ancient masonry, and this goes right back in our history. And so, joining the Royal Arch, you complete that journey. So that's why alignment between craft and the Royal Arch is so important, because we are aligned, and that's accepted in craft masonry in our constitutions. And I think at times we forget that in the craft. We think the craft is entire and complete, and it is in its own way. But our preliminary declarations say there is more, and the Royal Arch is that more.
Well, I thought we could do, Patrick, and thank you ever so much indeed, companions, brethren, ladies and gentlemen, for sending in your questions. I thought we could get to our first question this evening, and this comes from Freddie. And Freddie says, should the Royal Arch be added to the craft like it is in Scotland?
Oh, dear. Well, again, that goes back to this fantastic and unique situation we have in Masonry and our constitution. The Royal Arch position is unique, that it's not a fourth degree, it's not tacked onto the craft, but it completes that journey in pure ancient masonry. This is our history, this is our heritage. So I think rather than thinking about trying to change it to make it, to go back actually to what the ancients did, which is to work it as a fourth degree in Freemasonry, let's embrace this unique situation we have and revel in it. This isn't a fudge that people sometimes talk about, the Sussex fudge, and how the Royal Arch became attached to the craft, or so how the Royal Arch ended up in the situation it is in the Book of Constitutions, etc. Back in 1813. It's not a fudge. It's a fantastic, unusual, unique situation. So let's enjoy it, let's appreciate it, and revel in that rather than thinking, let's change it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, let's talk about, if this is okay, why do you think it's taken such a long time for Royal Arch to become proactive nationally? Because it's not happened overnight, has it? I think it's fair to say.
No, it hasn't. And you're very naughty to ask that question.
I can't make life too easy for you.
No, Brady, no, thank you. I really appreciate it. It was bound to take time because at the moment, I've mentioned earlier, the craft has gone through some huge, massive changes in the last years. And it's really important for us to make sure the craft is in a great place and well governed, well looked after, with the right systems in place. Now we've got that sorted nationally, and with the amazing work that's happening through Metropolitan and the districts and the provinces, now that's been established, we can start to make these changes in the Royal Arch. So there is a proper order of doing things, and this is just the proper order. And I'm lucky enough to be able to be part of that change and progress going forward. And
it does make sense, doesn't it? Yeah, craft, and then the rest can follow, if you will. So what I thought we could do now, Patrick, if you're okay, I thought we could talk about some of those misconceptions of Royal Arch, and there's a few. So when would you say, in your opinion, is the best time to join Royal Arch? Because we often hear different things, don't we?
There is no right time, and this is, if we could have said, if any of us could have said there's a right time, we would have said it, and that would have been enshrined somewhere. But there is no right time. It depends on where the individual member is, what they want to do, what their work life is like, what their family life is like, and make slotting it at the right time. If someone ends up in a lodge where the progression is going to be really quick, perhaps they don't have the time to join the Royal Arch as early as they could do. As we know, you can join 4 weeks after you become a Master Mason. It took me 3 years, and actually for me that worked really well. For other people, that's not the right time. So it's a matter of deciding when is the right time for that individual. And it's really important for those of us who are involved in bringing Master Masons into the Royal Arch to have those conversations, not only about finding the right time, but also the right place, because we need to make sure we have the right unit to make sure every exaltee is looked after properly.
Yeah, and you're so right, actually, because people come in at different times, don't they? You mentioned 3 years. I think I joined Royal Arch 3 months after I was made a Master Mason, and loved every second of it. And it's we've all got our own opinions and our own timing for that, haven't we?
And some people don't join till after they've been through the chair, but because again they've had that quick journey, and actually that can be a good time, because if you haven't joined at that point, you come out of the chair, you've done your bit. You've done a fantastic job for your craft lodge, but there is more to explore. So if you haven't joined Royal Arch when you come out the chair, give it a go at that point. Really important.
So let's talk about other orders, because do you think Royal Arch chapter should be the first stop when it comes to joining an additional order, if you will?
Yeah, and sorry, I'm not going to tell you off calling it an additional order, because quite clearly, because the indissoluble link, it is the most important thing to join. Without a doubt. Again, we rejoice. I'm talking about this amazing, unique relationship we have between craft and the Royal Arch under our jurisdiction. So it's really important that we get that is the first step, the next step that people take once they've become a craft member. And I'm not saying you shouldn't join anything else. Heck, I'm sure you are. I belong to lots of other orders, but that is what's said. The Grand Master, as first Grand Principal, has sat in the chair of the Grand Temple and said, before you join any other order in Freemasonry, you should join the Royal Arch. And it is really important to take that step first.
So when do you think it should be discussed with a non-Royal Arch member that Royal Arch actually exists, or to place that hand on the shoulder? Should it be done before a Mason becomes a Mason? Should it be done during the journey as they travel through their various offices? When's a good time to actually tell them about Royal Arch?
Well, again, it depends on the person. Some people want to know as much as they can before they join, and if you look in the guidance and the questions that are prepared in the members' pathway, there's actually a little section there talking about the Royal Arch. But what we don't want to do at that stage is confuse any potential initiates as well. So we've got to be really careful about that. But I think as soon as someone joins, they will be seeing Royal Arch representatives and regalia and issues as soon as they walk into a craft lodge, because people will be there wearing their Royal Arch jewels. There will be a statement about a Royal Arch representative possibly on the summons for the meeting. Maybe the Royal Arch representative or ambassador is going to be talking about the Royal Arch in the course of the meeting. So the Royal Arch is going to be there as soon as they come in, so they need to understand about it. But again, it's when's the right time? It depends on the individual, because we need to make sure the individual journey works for that person.
Now, one of the things I wanted to do tonight, very important with our topic, our subject matter, is to talk about the research that you've been doing. And there's been a lot of research and a lot of information that's come out of that. So let's talk about why you did the research and who did you speak to?
Oh, crumbs. We've had a really, really busy 12 months, and the research continues, actually. We have a fantastic president of the Committee of General Purposes, who's an academic. Stephen Tucker is a professor at Oxford. As a Cambridge man, I try not to hold that against him. and I'm sure he feels the same way. But, because we have a brilliant president, we want an evidence-based approach to what we're doing. We have the chance to create something amazing, anew, afresh, and we want to know what the situation is at the moment. So we spent these first almost 12 months taking a snapshot of where the Royal Arch is at present. So we've done a huge amount of data analysis. We've been very lucky with the support we've been given centrally and through various volunteers about just crunching data to see what the figures look like at the moment. And also we've been running surveys on the narrative. So we've been communicating with every province in the country and some of the districts to work out how they describe the Royal Arch. And there are massive differences about that. Some are still using phrases that were actually taken out and removed 17 years ago. But also, we're now talking to everybody who's been exalted in the Royal Arch since 2016. We're about to send out a survey to every Master Mason in the country. We haven't quite decided how far back. So we want to take an evidence-based approach to find out what the actual situation is and what people actually think, rather than relying on our experiences from however many years ago. That's really important. Sorry about that.
Hey, don't you worry about that. No, you worry. I'm used to that. So the interesting thing is, obviously, if you ask companions their opinion, they're going to tell you, and a lot of information has come from this. And I've had the luxury of going through some of it. So thank you very much indeed for letting me cast my eyes over it. What really stands out from that? Any shocks, any surprises?
The data project has been really interesting. Okay, slightly sobering at times, but really interesting. We haven't quite got as many members as we would like. If you leave aside the districts, we're at about 63,000 members. That's members, not memberships, because of course there's that duplication problem. And we've been working really hard to avoid any double counting. And our membership's at about 38.1% of the members of the craft, which is good and better than it was 20 years ago and before that. But actually, it's been pretty static for a while. And what we'd love to happen is us to move towards the 50% membership target that's been in place for a little while now. But of course, that varies massively. It varies between some provinces are at 31% and have actually improved hugely to get to 31%, and other provinces are at 55%. So massive variance on it. So the general membership position is really interesting. The other point, to allow us to talk about this 50% target, we have 19,000 members of craft lodges across the country who have joined the Royal Arch but no longer belong. And so if we had that 19,000 members still in the order, we would be at our 50% target already.
Yeah.
So one of the things we are looking at is how do we re-engage with those people? Clearly we've done things wrong that they didn't quite feel it was the right place for them. It may be they didn't have the right experience, their ceremony, so there could be all kinds of reasons. So one of the things we are going to look at is try to unpack that and how we can bring them back in. But that is another one of our issues. But also, just the size of our units. Average size per chapter in the country is 25, and it's a lot lower than the craft, and that gives us all kinds of issues about how we shape the future going forward, and actually how sustainable the membership is of a number of our chapters as well. So there's some really, really big things to look at. The other final point, and Brodie, I think you are glazing over, is really how many of our
Not at all, sir. Not at all. I love a good stat, mate.
Is that you look at the age of people join, and lots of 50 is always an interesting cutoff point. So the provinces those joining at 50 or over ranges between 36 and 64%. And we do have, as you can imagine, we have a slightly older membership. And of course, that then gives us issues going forward about sustainability of units and provinces, etc. So there's some big challenges for us. But the important thing now is we have the data so we can make informed decisions. That's the important thing.
And that's essential, isn't it? You have the data, you've got something to go on, and now we can start pushing things forward. But let's have a look at the work that's going on already. So let's talk about the changes that have already happened, thanks to the Committee of General Purposes, because there's already work that's going on, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And we've been really boring about how we're organising things. And you can glaze over at this point if you want. 12 months ago, we didn't have these structures. We've identified that one of the really important things we do is how we communicate with ground superintendents across the country. And we didn't have an effective mechanism for doing that. So we've set up a regional liaison group so that ground superintendents can contact us with their issues and thoughts, which we really, really want. And then we have a mechanism for cascading information down. The regional communications groups for which the craft is set up didn't quite cater for all the ground superintendents, because of course some are single headers, some aren't provincial ground masters as well. So we've now got this new and actually surprisingly effective process for us to talk to ground superintendents and then to talk back to us, and we're using them for information. We're going to run surveys through it. That's really exciting. And the other side of it is the working party, which I'm involved with, the Membership Communications Working Party. And we're looking at how we can improve comms and work on membership, and that's what we're touching on now.
So let's talk about communications, because once again, and I can see this from my own eyes, you've moved forward with that as well. What changes have you made to communicating?
Well, that's a variety of changes, and I really hope that members are beginning to see this already. What we're trying to do is to normalise the Royal Arch in all our communications that come out centrally, and I hope will be coming out through provinces, metropolitan districts too. So, for example, little things like Freemasonry Today, it's badged for both craft and Royal Arch, for UGLE, SGC. We now have articles about the Royal Arch in every edition of Freemasonry Today. So that means that anyone who's a Master Mason who's not in the Royal Arch will see that actually being the Royal Arch is all part and parcel. There is the indissoluble link. It is the representation of the indissoluble link. So that's been fantastic. And it's been brilliant the way that Freemasons Hall have adopted this. If you get something that comes out, if you get a letter through from the Grand Secretary, Grand Scribee, it will be badged both craft and Royal Arch. So with our central communications, we are working really hard on that normalisation. We're also really conscious that we want to improve communications directly into provinces. So again, in the last few months, we've set up a whole network of provincial communications officers in the same way that we have in the craft. And we hope that in 12 months' time, when we have the next national conference for provincial communications officers, it will be for both craft and the Royal Arch. And that's fantastic. It then gives us a way of communicating directly into provinces and to members in provinces in a way that we haven't had before. But also it gives someone in each province a role to make sure that the Royal Arch is promoted, but also in a consistent way across the country. So that's really exciting. So those comms changes are starting to come. And
it makes sense, doesn't it? It makes complete sense to do this. It's almost a no-brainer, isn't it? And as you've said, we've got the evidence there to keep pushing that forward. Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier on, Patrick, about COVID, and it's affected the world. It's affected all of our lives, and it's certainly affected Freemasonry. How has it affected Royal Arch?
Well, it's affected the Royal Arch as it has as it has the craft and every other order in Freemasonry. But the great thing, we were concerned that we would be harder hit than the craft, but actually the stats, the data is really good, that actually we've membership losses are in exactly the same proportion as the craft. I know that perhaps other orders have been hit harder, and that's fantastic because, of course, we do have an older membership in the Royal Arch than we do in the craft. And so we haven't had either the deaths or the resignations in the same way. So actually we're traveling really positively forward. But the challenge we have, it's not just the challenge we have in the Royal Arch, but every order in Freemasonry at the moment, is that people haven't come back as quickly as we would like. And that units are still having to, be it lodges, chapters, whatever, still having to cope with smaller numbers in attendance. So that means that we still, that gives us challenges. And one of the things we are looking at is actually, do we need to take more proactive planning going forward for this to continue? Because this may not just be a short-term issue. But the brilliant thing is to see how Met and the provinces have responded to make sure that every exaltation, we still have a high-quality exaltation taking place. There are teams all over the country that are parachuted in to make sure the exaltations are fantastic for our candidates coming in, even though the numbers in attendance may not quite be as high as would have been beforehand. So actually, all things considered, I think if we were given if we'd seen where we are now when we went into COVID, we'd be really happy, not complacent, but happy.
Oh, so good to hear you talk like that. And you're right. There's been a wonderful team all over the country in every province who've been helping out, and that's the term essentially, isn't it? If we could, Patrick, I'd like to go to a couple of questions that we have.
Yeah, that'd be great.
This one from Adam Reed. He would like to know, how important is sharing work within the lodge? And I thought that was perfect to discuss after our last conversation.
Brilliant. It's a really good question. That sharing work is absolutely crucial for a number of reasons. And again, it's not just in the Royal Arch. It's in every ceremony we go through. We want the important thing. The most important person in any ceremony is the candidate. Absolutely. And that can be an initiate, an exaltee, or it could be a first-time master going through the chair or a first-time principal. They are the most important person. Because if we get that ceremony right for them, we have an enthusiastic Mason for life. If we get it wrong, we have somebody who's going to be talking to the retention team in a year or two's time. Because it's all about showing that we care for that person that's coming in. And sharing the work is all part of that. If we share the work, we make having different voices delivering ritual. It doesn't matter how good a ritualist you are. If you've got one person delivering the ritual throughout the entire ceremony, it's going to get a bit monotonous.
Yes.
So Brodie, present company accepted. I know that your ritual would be absolutely phenomenal. But that's really important. So by changing the intonation, changing the method of delivery, it keeps the candidate's experience right. And the other thing is actually it also gives us the opportunity to bring in people who are really special for that individual. So actually, why not parachute in the principal soldier, who's the deacon-like person? That ritual breaks down into three parts, so you can have three different people. Why not, if they've got a great mate who's introducing them into the chapter, or they've got a family member, get them to be involved as well. Let's make it really special for them. And of course, the flip side is also, as far as the chapter's concerned, it means it's easier for the workers in the unit to learn the ritual. Let's break it down so they can then deliver the ritual really well, rather than not quite know it properly and then stumble their way through. So it's a win-win situation. And the fantastic thing is that if you look at ritual books 20 years ago, and I know, Brodie, you aren't old enough, if you look at ritual books 20 years ago, there were just these huge slabs of ritual in there. But these days, it actually shows where you can break it down as well.
Oh, that's useful, isn't it? And you're so right. It's all about bringing variety into a ceremony. And actually, I'm on a bit of a roll here, actually, Patrick, because we've had another message from Ray Guthrie, and he says, "Are there any plans to introduce the office of mentor to Royal Arch?"
Really good question. Hot off the press.
Excellent.
Well, we're starting. It's again really exciting. Mentoring of whatever formats is really important, as we know. And it's been fantastic. You look at we've got a brilliant mentor in Metropolitan Grand Mentor in London. Strangely enough, he's in London because he's the Metropolitan Grand Mentor. And he did some fantastic research showing the difference between mentoring in the craft and the Royal Arch in London. Because in London, we have a mentoring structure, but it's not collared. And actually, mentoring is not as effective in London because it's for a variety of reasons, and partly because it's collared, not collared. So you may have seen already that we are now introducing provincial and metropolitan Grand Mentors as a first step. We have to introduce change slowly, and this is exactly how the craft introduced those changes as well. That it was introduced at provincial and metropolitan level first. And then having got that bedded down, it was then discussed whether we needed to have it at a local level and at lodge level. So this is our first step. We will see whether that's right. We'll see how the Grand Superintendents feel about it. But we think mentoring is absolutely crucial to look after and engage our candidates. Because again, we can get them in. If we do get someone in, we want to make sure they are looked after. And the mentor's role is crucial for that. So great question. And yes, we're looking at it and we're taking those first steps.
Oh, that's good to hear, Patrick. Thank you so much. Now we often talk about we've got older companions, fraternity, and that's okay. We need to look after them and embrace them, but we do need to bring in new members. How are you doing that?
Well, we are not worrying about the age of candidates because the lovely thing about the craft is we're bringing people in of all age groups, and actually the journey in pure ancient masonry is just as relevant if you're coming in at 18 or 21 through the university scheme, or if you're coming in at 80 at that point, because pure ancient masonry is this fantastic journey through 4 steps, not just 3. And the idea behind the Royal Arch, that idea of enlightenment, is just as appropriate at that age as it is for a youngster. So I can see no problem, no worry at all about it. And I hope that we don't think that when we're looking at potential candidates, we think we only have to bring in people of a certain age, a younger member. Anyone can enjoy the Royal Arch and benefit from it.
Do you think there's a possibility that we've forgotten about some of those members, those non-Royal Arch members, who we asked 10, 15 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, 30 years ago, they're not interested? Do you think we have to forget about those guys?
I think you're absolutely right. And actually, we then... with some of them, we then think, they've gone down a different journey. They joined another order or orders, and that's their journey. And actually, that's entirely wrong. We shouldn't take that view. And I hope we aren't taking that view as commonly as we used to. You talk to some people and they, in some provinces, and they have this idea, you're either a Mark man or a Royal Arch man. I think, why? Pure ancient masonry embraces that journey through to the Royal Arch, but actually you can go and enjoy the Mark as well. So why not do that too? They're not exclusive; they support each other.
Oh, absolutely. Now back to the questions. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, companions and brethren, thank you ever so much indeed for submitting those. This is from Martin Pryor, and he would like to know, what is the average time from when a brother is raised before he joins Royal Arch? Now, that's quite a specific question.
Oh, that's a very difficult question because I don't have that data in front of me.
That's fine.
It varies hugely. But interestingly, there's not as much variation across the country as one would expect. I'm now just racking my brains. I think it's about 4 years at the moment for those who do actually join. But there is some variation in that. And it depends. And there is some variation between provinces. Because some provinces... Actually, we do know some provinces, there are some people who say you don't join till after the chair, for example, which we've touched on already. And those will be slightly further out. But by and large, it's around there. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right time. And we shouldn't use that as a guide for when someone should join. That just happens to be an average. What we need to do is to find, and I'm sorry to keep banging on about this, but what we need to do is think about what is right for that individual at that time. If it's right for them at that time, brilliant. If not, it will still be there in the future when it is right. Because if you bring someone in at the wrong time, again, they're just going to be a casualty. And that's the last thing we want. It doesn't do anyone any good at all.
You're right. The timing is essential. So picture the scene. We have a new companion who's been in a few weeks. It could be a few months. What advice would you give to them So they've just joined. What advice would you give to them?
I think, well, it depends.
Again, very dirty on the individual.
It depends on the individual, but it also depends on what systems and support there is in place for them, because some will be in chapters where there is a form of mentoring and they are embraced and looking at, and there is guidance for them on their journey. And perhaps others will have joined chapters where there isn't that. And we've got to be really, so it's important to make sure we find that individual finds that. One thing I'm really conscious that can happen, again, we touched on how many smaller chapters we have. And so often we find that individuals are forced to the offices too quickly or more quickly than they would like. And it's so important, again, to make sure that if someone thinks it's not the right time for them, it's not the right time. They don't have to say yes. And it's better for them to take a slower journey at the right pace. So I think I think that's one thing we have to be very wary about. And that would be part of the advice I would give in those circumstances. Also, there is so much great knowledge and resource available. It's fantastic. Solomon, not that this is the Solomon Live or anything, but Solomon has got brilliant onboarding information now about people when they first join the Royal Arch. So go and look at that because it's brilliant. The Solomon team do such a good job for us. So, there is so much of interest on Solomon. So, and if they aren't being pointed to Solomon, I'd certainly be pointing them to Solomon too.
Oh, they're not half bad, those, that lot. They're all right. Now, I thought it was really important that we had a conversation before we got to this point. Archway. Let's talk about Archway.
Yeah.
Is it just the same as Pathway with a different name?
You are so cynical. No, and it's Archway's really important, really important. And actually, it's great the name is starting to stick now. We wanted to have a similar but different term to talk about what will be our pathway for the Royal Arch. And I think Archway is wholly appropriate for what it actually came from Quentin Humberston, the former Grand Treasurer. I won't say how many glasses of wine he'd had beforehand, but that's inappropriate. But Archway is similar but different because we've touched on the differences between craft and the Royal Arch. If we just boilerplated everything from Members Pathway into Archway, it would not work. And actually, we would not be doing our job properly. The attraction side, how we bring people into the Royal Arch, is entirely different than it is in the craft. We are recruiting from a membership, and that's why we need to have a strong craft, because we can't have a strong Royal Arch without having a strong craft. So we are recruiting from an existing membership, and we do it, and there are certain structures that need to happen for that. And one of the things we're really looking at the moment is how Royal Arch representatives or Royal Arch ambassadors work in various provinces. And again, going back to consultation, we're getting all this brilliant feedback from the Grand Superintendents about the structures they use. So we can then see how we can improve that. So as far as difference is concerned, how we attract is very different. The necessities and how we look after people is very different as well once they are in a chapter, and how we engage with them. Because, we are conscious that chapters are smaller. There isn't the same amount of time resource that we have in lodges because we don't have as many people, and we still need people to act as secretaries and DCs and almoners and treasurers, etc. So we're taking a bespoke view to make sure it works. What we put in place works for chapters, not just a fit-all structure we've just boilerplated over. So there's so much we need to do because it's similar but different.
Well, Patrick, I've absolutely loved our conversation, and many more questions I could ask. It's that point of Solomon Live where we ask you one more question, and I think it's clear that there's a lot of hard work that's going on in the background, a lot of hard work that's already been carried out. So when you look into the future, perhaps just 5 years into the future, where do you see Royal Arch?
So just a little detailed question.
just a nice little one to finish with.
Where do I see Royal Arch? I'm really excited, actually. Yeah. Really excited about where the Royal Arch is going to be, because I'm lucky enough to work with an amazing team producing Archway and looking at comms and driving Royal Arch forward. So I think we're going to have really an effective Archway system to make sure that we have enthusiastic companions joining sustainable units with a long-term future, who will then engage them with an enjoyable Royal Arch journey for the rest of their Masonic careers. That's where I think we're going to be. We're going to be so much closer to that. And I think we will see those percentages starting to move upwards, because I've been amazed and humbled by the enthusiasm that we see right away across the provinces and across Metropolitan in helping to bring the Royal Arch forward. And we will, in 5 years' time, we'll have so much more resource to support their efforts as well. Because, of course, what we're doing here, this isn't just some centralized, distant, top-down driven process. You look at the membership of our working party. Okay, I'm the token Londoner, fine. But we've got people from, as the expression goes, brethren of your own tribes and families, for those in the Royal Arch. We recognise that. And these are the people who are making these decisions and helping us drive it forward. We've got people from South Wales and West Lancashire, from Lincolnshire and Essex and Wiltshire. So we're bringing the whole country together, representing the whole country, to try to make this work. So it's a journey we're all going on together. And as long as we all continue to support it, I think the Royal Arch is going to go from strength to strength.
It will. And as somebody who is a companion, a Royal Arch member, I'm very excited about the future, Patrick. Thank you to you and the team that are working hard in the background to make sure that happens. Sir, did you have a pleasurable experience on Solomon Live?
Oh, this has been fantastic, Brody, and I so appreciate the opportunity. And it's just a joy to see you, particularly not wearing that awful check suit the way we were together last.
It's taken me a while to get over that. I burnt it. Don't worry about it. You'll never see it again. Patrick, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you on Solomon Live. Thank you for joining us here. And the next Solomon Live will be on Tuesday, the 15th of March, where our topic will be Masonry Universal, an interview with Grand Chancellor Paul Engel, UGLE's Foreign Secretary, who will share insights and anecdotes from across the world of Freemasonry. And there's a lot of world to have a look at. So that's 7:30 on Tuesday, the 15th of March. Please add that to your diary. But of course, we will not let you forget about it. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you register with Solomon Live. So many great reasons to go and check that wonderful facility out to have a look at. So that's 7:30 on Tuesday, the 15th of March. If you haven't done so already, make sure you register for Solomon. You'll find us in no time at all. solomon.ugle.org.uk. So many great reasons to go and visit. Until then, brethren, have a safe evening, and we'll see you very, very soon. Good night.